Most gardeners are about to make a huge mistake this season. And honestly, it's not about watering too little. It's actually the opposite. Overwatering during extreme heat is quietly destroying root systems, flushing nutrients out of the soil and training plants to become weak and dependent. I've seen it in backyard beds, containers, even hydro setups. Plants look stressed, so people water more and yields drop even faster. Here's the part most people don't realize. In a heat wave, oxygen in the soil matters just as much as moisture. When you keep soil constantly wet, roots suffocate, microbial life collapses, and your plants stop accessing nutrients even if they're sitting in rich soil. That's why drought-tolerant plants aren't just a backup plan for 2026. They're your smartest strategy. And before we even get into the plants, there's one thing that changed how I handle drought conditions completely. I started using a small 4-liter electric composter in my kitchen. It turns food scraps into dry, nutrient-rich material in hours instead of waiting months. That matters because during heat waves, your soil burns through organic matter fast. Having a constant supply of compost means your soil holds water better and feeds plants more efficiently. I'll leave the exact one I use in the description if you want to check it out. It solves a problem most gardeners don't even realize they have until their soil dries out and stops performing. Now let's get into the plants that actually thrive when everything else starts struggling. The first one surprises most people because they underestimate how tough it is. Okra is one of the most heat-resilient crops you can grow. I've run it through weeks of intense sun with minimal watering, and it still produces consistently. The key is deep watering early on to establish strong roots. Once it's established, you can pull back significantly. In raised beds, I water deeply every 4 to 5 days instead of daily light watering. That forces roots to go deeper, where moisture actually lasts. If you're growing in containers, you'll need slightly more frequent watering, but still avoid the daily shallow approach. Okra thrives in stress, and that stress actually improves yield if managed correctly. Now here's where most people go wrong with leafy greens during heat waves. They keep trying to grow lettuce and spinach like it's spring. Instead, switch to amaranth. This plant handles heat like almost nothing else. The leaves are nutrient-dense, grow fast, and don't bolt the way traditional greens do. I've grown it in direct sun where lettuce completely failed within days. If you harvest young leaves regularly, you keep it productive longer. In hydroponic systems, it performs even better because nutrient uptake stays consistent even when temperatures rise. Let's talk about sweet potatoes, because this is where drought tolerance meets serious yield. Once established, sweet potatoes can handle dry conditions better than most root crops. The mistake people make is overwatering early and underestimating spacing. You need loose, well-draining soil and enough room for vines to spread. In a heat wave, those vines actually act like living mulch, shading the soil and reducing evaporation. I've measured soil temperature under dense sweet potato vines, and it's significantly cooler than exposed soil. That alone can make a huge difference in how much water your garden needs. And this next one is something most gardeners ignore until it's too late. Cowpeas, also known as black-eyed peas, are built for heat. They're nitrogen-fixing, which means they actually improve your soil while producing food. In poor soil conditions, they outperform many popular crops because they create their own fertility. I've used them in rotation after heavy feeding crops, and the difference in soil health is noticeable. If you're dealing with dry, depleted soil, this is one of the smartest crops you can plant. Now here's where things get interesting because herbs behave differently in extreme heat. Rosemary is one of the most drought-tolerant herbs you can grow, but only if you treat it correctly. Most people kill rosemary by overwatering it. It prefers dry conditions, well-draining soil, and minimal interference. In containers, use a gritty mix with sand or perlite to improve drainage. Once established, you can go long periods without watering. I've seen rosemary thrive in conditions where other herbs completely fail. But not all herbs handle heat the same way, and that's where people get confused. Basil, for example, can tolerate heat, but not drought. That's a critical distinction. It needs consistent moisture, but benefits from mulching to reduce evaporation. This is where your compost comes back into play. Adding even a thin layer of compost to the soil surface improves water retention significantly. It's a simple adjustment, but it changes how often you need to water. Let's move into one of the most overlooked drought-tolerant crops, eggplant. Eggplants love heat. In fact, they struggle more in cool conditions than hot ones. The key is maintaining consistent but not excessive moisture. In raised beds, I water deeply every 3 to 4 days and let the top layer dry out between watering. This prevents root rot while still supporting fruit production. If you notice flowers dropping, it's often a sign of inconsistent watering, not just heat stress. Now here's something most people won't tell you. Mulch matters more than the plant itself during a heat wave. You can grow drought-tolerant plants, but if your soil is exposed, you're still losing moisture rapidly. I use a combination of shredded leaves, grass clippings, and compost. The goal is to create a layer that reduces evaporation while still allowing airflow. In my beds, this can cut watering needs by nearly half. That's not theory, that's measured results over multiple seasons. And the last plant on this list is one that performs incredibly well in both soil and hydro systems: peppers. Hot peppers, especially, are extremely resilient, that they can handle high temperatures and still produce heavily if managed correctly. The mistake people make is overfeeding them with nitrogen, which leads to excessive leaf growth and fewer fruits. In heat conditions, you want balanced nutrients and slightly reduced watering to encourage fruiting. Stress, when controlled, actually improves pepper production. Now here's the part most gardeners overlook entirely. It's not just about choosing drought-tolerant plants. It's about training your garden to survive with less water. That means deeper watering, better soil structure, and consistent organic matter input. This is where having access to quick compost becomes a real advantage. Instead of waiting months for compost to break down, you can continuously feed your soil and improve its ability to retain moisture. If you've made it this far, you're already ahead of most gardeners heading into 2026, because while others are reacting to the heat wave, you're preparing for it. And if you want more practical, no-nonsense gardening strategies like this, subscribe to the channel. This isn't about trends or surface-level tips. It's about understanding how plants actually behave under real conditions and using that knowledge to get consistent results. At the end of the day, drought resistance isn't just a plant trait, it's a system. Soil structure, microbial life, root depth, and watering strategy all work together. Once you understand that, you stop chasing problems and start building a garden that can handle whatever the season throws at it. If this helped you rethink how you're approaching this growing season, share it with someone who's still watering every day, thinking they're helping their plants.